And then I'm gonna figure out how to do this, Dave. I'm gonna try and spotlight you, and that should help.
Okay, looks good.
There we go. Did you change your shirt, Dave?
I did, just for you.
Thank you.
Let's see, I might get that. There we go.
Well, thanks for not doing it on camera.
Yeah, some old war wounds. A little bit of history first. First time I went fishing for pinks there, Bill was up fishing the day before and he says, bring a blue fly. That's all you have to do is bring a blue fly. So the first blue flies I tied looked like this. They had a chenille here, yellow head, and crystal flash body. I don't know how well that shows. It shows better over here. Anyways, we'll do Dave's technique. So basically that was the fly. It worked really well. I don't see anybody who was with me at the time here, but Colin and John Pierce and Christopher were with me, and we did really well with that fly. And another little version is just changing the color of the crystal flash, again with a chartreuse head. What I found is initially I tied a lot of them in a size 4, and I found that 4s were too big. They basically, you snag more than you should have, and the fish didn't seem to be able to close their mouth on it. So you end up catching a couple on the side of the mouth. So what I did is I downsized the hook, and I found it was really much better. The fish were actually inhaling it. So it worked out really well. And so these were kind of my initial flies that I had tied. And I picked up these green beads. It's hard to see there, but I picked up these green tungsten beads in the States. And this company, I kind of found out that they were starting up, and they were half in Canada and half. The guy said, well, geez, where do you live? And I said, I live in Canada. And he says, oh, we're in Canada too. He says, I have an American address and a Canadian address. So anyways, I was able to pick up these bead heads that are green, and sort of my signature fly was these green bead heads, and probably have tied up a few and gave out quite a few. And so if you see one of the green bead heads, you know where it came from. But what I found is by using different combinations, and I spent the entire month of August there last year, and I fished twice a day on the incoming tides. And I modified the fly until I got to the point where I figured that was it. Come up with a fairly decent fly. Having said that, I can tell you that if you're like Florin on the anywhere, you're always on the search for materials. So I'll show you a couple different materials. I mean, these are fly shop materials. This particular one I sent out, it was in that picture I sent out, and this one. And the difference between these last two is about $6 for the same amount of material. Somewhere's in my fly box, and you should always look in your fly box. I found this material, I really like this, and the fish really like that material. So what I did find out was I caught more fish on a blue fly in Campbell River. Having said that, I mean, I've caught them with combinations of blue and red and pink and green. So I have a couple of those in my box, because you never know when you're on the river, you get bored, right? You want to change things up. Gets monotonous after a while. So mechanical is, I think, what Ron Estes said. So you lose a lot of flies in the river because there's a lot of deadhead logs. The rocks have a lot of moss on them. So, and there's some good sized rocks there. And what you'll find is the pinks will tend to be behind these big boulders or a log. So a lot of them are in transit and they just rest there for a couple of minutes and it gives you an opportunity to cast to them. So I'm going to tie up a couple of flies today, and we'll start with the Chartreuse. Now, it's a little harder to get a hold of the green fluorescent one, bead, but if you're interested, I'm going to get a hold of the supplier and ask them if he'd sell me some in bulk so we can get a better price. I know Mike wanted to get some, and a couple other people, so I'll see if I can get some of the
Mike
green
ordered some last night.
Oh, you did order them, eh? Okay, I'll still try to get some at a decent price. There's still,
Yeah, I would
Much-
certainly get some as well from you.
yeah. I mean, I got Florin onto this supplier and he seems to like it too, so. Anyways, it works with a Chartreuse head. Now, what I do is, as you know, salmon fishing is barbless. So the first thing I do is I always make sure, you know, the barb has been pinched. Now, most people take a pair of pliers and do that. You can do that ahead of time. But I always like to make sure that the barb is pinched. So I always, before I start tying, I always do a little pinch of the barb. That one had been previously pinched. And I'm using a 3/16 bead head. Now with the number 6, it will allow you to use a 5/32. I find that in the curvature of the hook, this part right here, depending on the bend, the 5/32 is 5/32s are a little tight. So the 3/16 are great. They just go around the bend. And if you haven't debarbed your hook, they will get caught up. So you know that your hook hasn't been debarbed. Anyways, and I use, right now, I'm using a peacock blue. I really like this color. And it's trying to see the number for you. It's a 140.
You get that from Robinson's?
Yeah, I got most of
Yeah.
this material, most of it, I guess I got from Robinson's. A couple others, it's like I said, every place I go, I'm always looking for something. My wife sees me disappear in the material shop or whatever. She knows what I'm looking for. Normally what you do in any fly is you put a good strand of thread down the hook so that your material will stick, won't slide around. Now, I mentioned to you, I use this lateral scale. A lot of people didn't seem to know much about this. I have it in all kinds of different colors. I really like this blue. And again, I have it in a finer one, and this is a red, which works well.
It's like flash, but it's got a little crinkle to it.
I don't know if you remember, but when I had a fly I tied up, which was red and black for Prospect Lake. And I always put a couple strands of this lateral scale in, and I find the reflection, because it has a crinkle in it, is much more reflective than one that doesn't, like a crystal flash. Oh, I forgot to tell you. In this, I take 4 strands, okay? And I drive the material right up against the head so the head won't come back. When I finish tying that, the head should be secured. A little history about me. I started tying flies between 5 and 6. I used to go salmon fishing, and my father would give me 2 flies. Problem is that the banks of the river were solid granite, and the pools were in between these 2 valleys of rock, and very easy to break off the hook. So you'll be fishing away and you, geez, these fish seem to be taking your fly, but you're not catching anything. And you bring it in, of course, you just break off the tip of the fly. You know, you don't mangle the fly. It seemed to just break off the tip of the hook. So my father only gave me two because back in 1960s, they were $1.25 a piece. So if we were to take that in today's dollars, probably about 20 or 30 bucks for a fly, you know, in today's wages. So yeah, so that's why I only got two per trip. So I started tying my own. I didn't have any lessons. The first lessons I actually had were from Dave Robinson here. So, but I am old fashioned. I never use a lot of tools, and you'll see that. So what I just did was I cut the tail, which is 4, and you want to make sure that the 4 pieces of lateral scale are separated so that when it goes through the water, it gives a vibration. And it's no longer than the length of the hook, the shaft on the hook. So this material, I had to motor it in Robinson's, so it was in that picture I sent to you. So it should be available. Well, I was down yesterday and it was at Robinson's. Unlike Florin, he's going to scrunch here, I never use anything to measure the length of the material like he has. I eyeball it. And so over a period of time, I realized that when I cut the piece of material, I have to adjust it to make sure it, so after a while you get to know exactly. So how much material you'll need. So Florian, you can watch and see if I eyeballed it right. I put quite a bit of attention.
I never measure it, Dave. I simply never
I know.
cut it. I keep it on a spool.
Yeah. I haven't, well, when spools look like this, it's a little more delicate, harder. Anyways, I'm just teasing you. So I usually put quite a bit of tension on this wrap, so that it becomes nice and even. And towards the head, I wrap it hard. So Florin, here's the waist. Oh, it fell out on my hand. Anyways,
I am appropriately impressed.
and I don't do that for you. I just learned over the years material's expensive. Now, that's basically the fly, and I put a, I don't know if I spelled Henson right, but anyway, Sally Henson, everybody knows what it is. I just put a nice little light layer of it on. And the main reason is the fish have teeth and it kind of rips that up. When I first started, I used a Chanel, and Chanel has kind of sticks away from the body. This is flat tinsel. So what you want to use is flat tinsel, you know. So did that come across clear in the time?
Yep.
Too quick? I
Yep.
don't know.
No, that was good.
This thing, and you know, when I was waiting, I tied those up. So you know, you can whip these off in a hurry. This fly is extremely effective. Now I'll do the other. As I said, when I go through materials, I tied these up yesterday when I was waiting to get online. So you can see that I have various different colors of materials and various different, I'll try all these out. And, you know, there are days when fish aren't as productive as others. So I'll try these out and try to get a reaction out of the fish, and I will. Here's one that's it's completely Chartreuse, and this just uses the lateral scale and the bead head. I'll tie one of those up because it's a little trickier to tie, but I'll tie this other one up using this French tinsel. If you could get this on sale someplace, it does tie a nicer fly, in my opinion, than the other one, but it's not worth the money. Because as I said, it's $3.99 versus $9.99, so it's $6, so it's 3 times as expensive, basically.
Yeah, but a man with all your money, Dave, what the hell?
Yeah, well, you know, the kids want to have some when I go, yeah. I try not to leave them too much, but I don't want to spoil them. You buy a boat, then you realize how much a boat costs. It's not the boat, it's all the stuff that goes into it. So, yeah, Mike and I just got back from kokanee fishing in the interior. And we found an excellent place that's right on Little Decca. So the place we're going to be staying at next year has room for four beds. I don't know. It's got king and queens, but I don't know about you, but I'm sleeping with Mike. It's not my girl, so we all have our own beds. But there is another cabin.
You'll never go back, man.
Yeah. Although we did sleep all in the same room, which was interesting, which was really good because I found out that Mike has his feminine qualities, and that being is the mosquitoes liked him better than they liked me. So he was well bitten, and I was bitten a bit.
That's why I spent money and bought a flex tail rechargeable mosquito killer for next year.
So people saw that I measured it. Can you see that, or am I got too much?
Yep.
Is that better?
That's a little better. Yeah, the contrast is a little better there. Yeah.
Downstairs would have been better because the lighting is much better. It's all natural light, but the computer wasn't working. So again, the tail, 4 pieces of lateral scale, same length as the body. Here we're going to use this extravagant French flat braid. Now, I used to be able to buy this for about $3.99, but they put a little symbol of a fly and they put it on this special thing and they jacked the price up by $6. So anyways, if somebody can find a good supplier of that, be good. I mean, they seem to have a lot of standardized pricing, but once in a while you can find a bargain. And again, as I said, we all use all different types of materials in my flies. Now, I used to put a piece of wire down the fly to hold on the body to keep it from tearing up. And what I found didn't do any good. You're just as better off to put a little coat of Sally Henson on. Now, what I have used, and I'm moving, so my wife has packed all my fishing gear and fly tying, my fly tying gear, because she doesn't want the feathers all over the house as she vacuums. But the dog likes the feathers too. Is the UV coating. I would normally put some UV coating on this too. I don't think you really need it. The Helly Hansen works well. Last year I was up in Campbell River. I tied a few up and it didn't make any difference. But if it was a dull day, it might make a difference. Geez, Florin, where's the surplus material? Can you see it?
Sorry, what was that? What did you say?
Oh, pointing
This
out
is-
very little surplus. He guesses properly the length he needs.
Yeah,
Um,
I've seen that. It's well, I guess how many thousands of these have you tied, Dave?
oh, well, guy doesn't like to talk about how many he tied.
I see. Okay.
Like, I mean,
That's an
fishing
answer.
rods. My wife asked me how many flies I own, and then it's a sad story around here because whatever closet she opens, there's flies because I don't get
Yeah.
in one place, right? Yeah, a guy can never be too well flied, as you know, Florin.
I agree. Yeah.
And you know the way to a man's heart is through his fly.
So I don't know if you noticed this particular fly, but it's much brighter. And it's sort of gets that translucent look to it. Again, geez, that looks like that's actually a green head. I don't know if I can change the settings on this.
I think if you put the fly closer to the camera, right? Like take it out of, oh,
Not
No.
too high.
too high.
Drop it down.
Push it forward.
Yeah. And down a bit. There you go.
It's a green head. But what I was trying to tell you, I like the green and prefer the green, but I call it my signature fly because nobody had the green because they were unavailable, and I had bought 1,000 of them back. They're all made in Czechoslovakia. I don't know where the new ones are made. I think they're made in China, but anyways, I burned through those.
For those who don't know what he's talking about, the Sally Hanson's, it's fingernail polish, Sally Hanson extreme wear. And the one I've got, you can get at London Drugs. It's number 109 with underneath says invisible. So it's basically a clear fingernail lacquer. Cheap. Works real well.
That creates a good surface. Your fly doesn't get eaten up. You'll break your hook or bend your hook before the fly dissipates.
Dave,
I'm emphasizing a very tiny body, as you can see in my thing. Do not go for heavy bodied flies. Like, as I said, this is my original fly, which was a number 4 using a Chanel. And I lost a lot on hookups. This one, the number 6 and a tiny body, much better.
Good.
Sounds good.
The
Okay.
other- Oh yeah, I was going to show you how to do one on a lateral scale. Because sometimes you can't always get, I can do it out of blue. Anyway, sometimes you can't always get what you're looking for. So I ran into a place in the middle of nowhere and I got this lateral scale that's salt water that, look at the color blue it is, just gorgeous. It's meant for salt water, but it really works well in the Campbell. I'll just show you how the tie went up. It's a little trickier. So you don't waste any material. Okay. Because it's blue, I'll go for a contrasting
come in,
blue.
Adriana.
Oh, these beads too, I really like these fluorescent pink beads. I only have one color of thread that I was left out, and it's blue because I asked for blue thread. So when they packed everything away, I was allowed one spool of thread, so I have blue. So if I tie any flies up, regardless of whatever color the fly is, I have blue thread. Again, you try, when you're going through the package, not to waste any, try to, when you look at the package and you filter through, try to get 4 from the get-go at the right length, and then you don't have to waste any materials. Again, I'm using 4 pieces of lateral scale in the saltwater blue. No. No. Oh, another thing, this lateral scale with salt water is, for some reason, is really substantial compared to the other one. It just, whatever it's made of, it's strong.
I think what they do with those, Dave, is they have some sort of UV material in it. That's why they call it for salt water, because the UV doesn't work well in fresh water, but in salt water, it seems to be more attractive.
Okay, so I should have showed you that. I just randomly cut a piece of material off, but I tell you what, for those who are learning, at the on your vise, right? You got a certain length of the vise. For these particular flies, if you cut a piece of material that's the exact length of this, well, my base, but you can judge it from your base. And if it needs to be altered a little ways, you can put a mark on your base of your fly, your vise, and that way you don't waste any material unless you have something like Florin has. But on this loose material, it's extremely hard to put one of its keepers on. Again, I just want to show you how compact a fly this makes, and when they take it, they really get well hooked.
Is there one strand or 2 strands of flash you got there?
I only use 1 strand, and if you want to, you know, like say you wanted to make it thicker, you can make the strand longer and go over twice.
Dave,
Yeah.
is the Chanel or whatever you're winding there, is it thicker at the bead head than it is at the tail?
Yes, it
No.
is. It's
Just
good
a little, right?
thicker. I usually make it a little bigger, not substantially bigger, and it's good to fluff up your tail. But you can see it looks fairly uniform, but it is a little bigger at the head. And if it isn't, if again, I'm conscious of material after listening to flowing, you know, you can put a couple extra strands of thread and tie them up. You notice how many pieces of equipment did I use in tying my flies?
I'm surprised you have.
Were you counting them?
I'm surprised you haven't done away with the vise and figured out how to do that with your fingers.
Well, I learned how to tie them on a wine, you know, the cork from a wine bottle. So I mean, you know, and I tied them at the bench alongside the river, right? You know, bench being the picnic table, right? Anyways, it goes with back in the day, right? You didn't have a lot of resources. So again, with this one pair of scissors, you kind of put your fly. But you can you see that as a fly? It's how metallic it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if you're worried about body size, you can put an extra layer or two of Henson on, or Sally Hansen on. So I want to tell you that this is the same fly tied with just the pearl. See how nice and geez, I can't see contrasting. Can you see how nice and that when that goes through the water, how reflective it is? So they're hitting it because it's reflective. You know, they get that flash going through the water. It looks like a little minnow. That's my theory anyways, but they sure take it. And as I have them in pink. There's a couple pinks, and I had a couple red, use the red. I, you know, tied them up with different things. You get bored tying the same thing, even though if it works, you still get bored tying it. So it was interesting to see that I was into Robinson's, and now they have a fly very similar to the one I've been tying up for years. They don't have the green heads though. Any questions?
So how long does your fly last? So just with the Sally Hansen, because usually when I use Flashaboo like that, I put a wire rib to reinforce it because I find it shreds easily.
As I said, I used to do that, and actually, you laugh over this one. Somewhere is here, but I actually here. This might be one. No. If you put enough Howie Hansen on, it gets a nice clear hard coat, and they're not going to destroy it. I actually have some flies. Oh, here's one. It's entirely tied with wire. No, that isn't it. I have some that are tied with wire. Just wire. That might be it.
And is that a blue wire or what color wire?
Right there. Does it show up? Here, let me do it this way. Yeah, it's peacock blue wire.
Mm-hmm.
Does that show up?
Yep, a little higher and to your right more. Yep, that's good.
Yeah.
But that's made of a wire. And can you tell any difference between the two? The only reason I don't use the wire, it's a lot more expensive, but it's also you know, this material, I really like how reflective it is. I don't seem to get the same, you know, I watched my fly in the water. I don't seem to get the same reflection, although, you know, like some of these flies, let me find one.
Have you tried to tie this fly upside down with, let's say, dumbbell eyes or something?
I wouldn't recommend it because you're going to get hooked up. You need a really, you could use it, but there's no need. I mean, let's put it this way. I go down in the morning and I set myself a limit, and maybe 15 or 20 or an hour later, I'm gone, right? I'll go back and even do the same thing. If you have the right fly and the right technique and the right line, that's another thing I didn't talk about today, and they're downstairs, but you want to have a sinking line on the end of your floating line. I use a floating line with a 7-foot sinking line, and they come in different colors. Blue and green are the best colors for Campbell River. And you can cast better with a 7-foot than you could with, you know, like a 9 or longer.
This is a tungsten core sinking piece of sinking line, is it?
Yeah, you can go down to Robinson's, or you can order them online. They're much cheaper online. Yeah, they'll make them up with the double loops on them, and you tell them what you want. You know, either the green or the blue, and they charge you by the foot to do them up, and then they charge you to do the ends on them. Tony has a piece of equipment that he can do his own ends. And by the own ends, that's creating the loop, a finished loop. So now, just to give you an idea, I bought a package of 1,000 number 6 hooks, and I figured it out. They're about half or less than the price of a store. If you go into any sporting goods store and buy a package of hooks, they're half the price or less. So anybody, I'll pass on the saving there. anybody who wants to buy 50 or 100, that's fine.
And these are chrome plated hooks?
These are stainless steel
Okay,
and they're
Yeah.
made in Korea. They're not made. in
Ah.
Okay, yeah, Dave, I don't know whether you saw my email reply. I will take 50.
Okay.
Dave, I have to go, so thank you very much. And I'll come over and pick up 50 as well.
Yeah. Now, Bill asked me to do this demonstration. I hope it's been helpful.
It's
Yeah.
been excellent, Dave, really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As I
Sorry, I
said,
gotta go, guys.
Okay,
the
bye.
most
Yep.
people want to cast to the other side of the river. You don't need to in Campbell River. The fish swim literally by your feet. Most people wade in too far. I'm hoping that we can all get together for a little demonstration. And again, it's a technique. I can give you this like the fly and they can be hitting it, but unless you know the feel, they just nudge it. Unless you know what that feels like, you're not going to catch the fish. It's like dry fly fishing. You know, there's a little, you know, you have to be watching the fly. On these particular flies, you got to have a good light rod so you can feel the little nibble. And so you
Yeah.
can set the hook.
So
It's
what,
in
what
water.
weight line and rod do you use, Dave?
I use a 7 or an 8. I wouldn't use any lighter because last year I was catching 5. Oh, I got into them towards the later part of August. And one evening, every one I caught was about 5 pounds chrome, just right out. They were coming in with the tide. And I was catching and releasing these things. And I went home tired. And if I had a lighter rod, you know, you got to play them longer, right? And it's not fair to you got to realize that when you go to the Campbell River, you're not the only one in the river. So you're going to need a rod, I would say 7 to 9 weight, so that you can play it properly, so that you don't interfere with everybody else fishing on the river. So you want to have some control of the fish. Obviously, you know, a 4 or 5 pound fish is going to have control of you if you have a light rod. But, you know, that range of 7, 8, 9 is great. You know, you can go too light. You know, there are some of the runs, they're 2 and 3 pounds. 6 would be fine. But again, when you're casting,